African flag and it was green, red, and black. Ah. Yeah, 3 cheers for the old green, red, and black. I saw the German flag, and what is it? It's red and black and orange or something, or yellow. And now the Russian flag is nice. At least it's got nice colors. And the French flag isn't a very nice country, but they have nice colors. And we really have, Americans so love their country that other people think they have to love their country and pretend that it's like our country. And yeah, they do. You say, this is our great country of Togo, And I almost went there as a missionary. I thought it was to go, and that got me excited right away. But I'm going to talk to you about our nation's past and about our present, about our future. I don't look at our country. In fact, over this book, and this is your pastor, I know feels the same way, but there seems to be a thing amongst King James Bible believers that one of the doctrines of the church is to hate this country. And I am not of that stripe, and I know your pastor is not of that stripe, and I appreciate it. And so I'm going to talk to you about our past, our present, and our future. And I believe that America has a future, okay? Unlike Bible believers. And if that makes me a heretic, I'll fight anybody over that one, all right? So I'm going to talk to you about this country. The first thing I want to say about our past is that, and I know I've mentioned it before, but this is the only nation that was established on the God of this Bible. By that, I mean its inception, the people, our founding fathers, they didn't gather around a table and decide to come up with this idea of free enterprise. I may have told you this, but there is not a refinery in the country that makes diesel fuel. Or that was built, I should say, that was built to make diesel fuel. They all make diesel fuel. None of them nobody ever said, hey, we'll put a refinery in here and we're going to make diesel fuel. You know why? They built a refinery and they said they're going to take raw crude oil and we're going to build high-test gasoline. We're going to make high-test gasoline. And when you take and you make high-test gasoline, you have a byproduct. That byproduct is diesel fuel. And our founding fathers, our forefathers, didn't get off the Mayflower so they could establish Pizza Hut. They were not thinking about their own lawn care business. They didn't want to have a rent-a-car business. They didn't say, let's start free enterprise. You know what they said? They said, we're going to found a nation on this Bible. And when you found a nation on this Bible, listen, this book is the source of liberty. And free enterprise is a byproduct of any nation that is founded on this book. And this is the greatest nation. Nobody came over here with plans to make a multicultural society. I've got news for our president, and I like him. And he got conned because, I've often said that Democrats are crooked and Republicans are cowards. A Democrat would steal the food off your table and put you in jail for disagreeing with it. And a Republican wouldn't say anything bad about it because the news media might run a negative story on them. And our president, right after 9/11, he made some kind of a statement about when Muslims and Jews and Christians founded this nation. There were no Muslims on the Mayflower. All right? This was never founded to be a multicultural society. Yes, anybody is welcome here, but what you're supposed to do is when you get here, you get off of the boat and you pick that scab off your forehead and you get down on your knees and you trust Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. And this nation, unlike any other nation in history, chose the God of this book at its inception. No, I still think that Israel is a special nation with God. I am not, look, there are so many promises in this book that I can claim I don't have to pick Israel's pocket. I am not trying to kill them so that I can inherit their promises. I'm not interested in that. But mark this down. Israel did not choose God. God chose Israel. He made them His chosen people. That's why we call them His chosen people. And yes, I still believe, as you do, I still believe the Lord's going to reestablish Israel. I had somebody tell me, they're blowing up little Jewish kids on buses. That's a nice Muslim thing to do. And they're blowing up Jewish kids on buses and other things like that in Israel. And some guy said, are you upset about what's going on in Israel? Are you scared about it? I said, oh no. I said, I'd only be upset if I lived over there and I was wearing a tablecloth with my head held on by a fan belt. Because I know whose land that is. That is Israel's land. And Ishmael can scream all he wants and talk about jihad, which I personally think is a jihoke. But, but I'm telling you, Israel didn't choose God. This nation chose God. And our founding fathers, and I don't know if you've ever been there to Philadelphia, but but they sat around the table, and I was in that room, and they sat around the table, and they corporately said, you know what, we're going to found a new nation. And then they looked toward heaven and said, we're going to make you our God. Boy, I'll tell you what, if God has a switch, that flipped it. If God has a heart, his pulse quickened. You say, you think God liked that? No, I know He liked it. He liked it so much that He went out and let those 13 fledgling colonies go out there and pound to sand the greatest military might of the world, England. I mean, us going against England at that time would be like you picking up tomorrow's headlines and it says Haiti declares war on America. Oh, seriously, you laugh, but then you start reading this, whoa, it's getting serious. They're inflating their Navy right now. And that's when we'd know we were in trouble. And so in 1776, the God of this book, the God that this nation was founded on, blessed those 13 colonies, made them 13 states, and let them whip England. And then just to show the world that it was not an aberration or a fluke, He let them go out in 1812 and do it a second time. And I have no animosity toward Britain or England. I think they are our brothers as far as our nation is concerned. I think that they lack some things, but they are good folks, and I'm not against them. But this nation was founded on the God of this book. People say, well, America is great because of its natural resources. Africa has far more natural resources than this country. Africa has so much gold, they have so many diamonds, they have so many precious stones beneath the ground of Africa that it would make America look like a pauper. You say, well, what is it? Is it the race? No, it's the religion. It's the religion. And they got the wrong God. You know, isn't it strange that you can have religions? Hindus have something like 300 and some gods. Wouldn't you think with 300 and some choices, you'd get the right one somewhere in there? I mean, if you had 300 and some choices to get God right, wouldn't you think you'd hit Him somewhere along the line? And 300 and some choices, them Hindus couldn't hit Him once. And you go to Africa, and they got a volcano god, and a river god, and an alligator god, and every other kind of god, and this is a god, and that is a god. And I'm going to tell you something: there's only one God, and it was not the resources of this country that made this a great country. It was not our free enterprise. You know, Eastern Europe got lied to. I'm glad they're out from under communism. I really am, but they got lied to. You know what? You know what they did? They sat over there and they looked at us and they said, boy, those Americans got everything. And they asked our politicians, and they said, how'd you guys end up with how'd you end up such a great country? And you know, our politicians told them, they said, oh man, it's free enterprise. If you guys had free enterprise, you'd be a great nation too. And you know what they can't understand? They're instituting free enterprise in nation after nation, and it's not working. Because it is not free enterprise. They say, well, it's our form of government, isn't it? You know, I really am offended every time I hear our wicked news media call this a democracy. It's not a democracy. It is a republic. And there's a world out there that thinks, oh yeah, if we just had that form of government, that Republican form of government with a bipartisan House and a bicameral House and a Senate, and they could have all those representatives and all those senators and a president elected by the people, boy, it'd be a great nation. You know something? We exported this form of government to a nation that needed it very badly. That nation was torn by a civil war just like ours. That nation needed freedom. That nation's people desired freedom. They desired to be a great nation. And we instituted our form of government. We just superimposed everything we got here right over top of them. But instead of Washington, D.C., their capital was Saigon. And in 1968, after that president came into power, when the next presidential election came up, he jailed the guy that was running against him and closed down every newspaper in the country that opposed him. It's not the form of government. You know, these people are always quoting Thomas Jefferson. Nobody will quote him on this one. He said, the reason that Christianity is the best friend of government is because Christianity is the only religion that changes the heart. You know, the one thing about, they call it a religion, but you know the one thing about Christianity is that it always pushes you to a higher standard. You guys tonight look better than you did when you got saved, not worse. Isn't that right? You live better than you did, not worse. We don't hear about, hey, did you hear about Joe? He was a great guy. He was an honest guy, true to his wife, got saved. Now he's a drunkard. He's running around. You don't hear those stories. It is just the opposite. Isn't that right? And some of you were out in a ditch somewhere. Some of you were the dregs. Some of you couldn't have been trusted behind somebody else's back. You couldn't be trusted with somebody else's wife. You couldn't be trusted with a dollar bill that wasn't yours. And you got saved. And the reason you can be trusted today is because Christianity pushes us to a higher standard. And all those other religions, including Islam, all they do is sanctify the lowest standard. So they make heaven an orgy. And they think that an expected woman is a good place to put a bomb. Hey, listen, we're all prone to that. You say, well, we'd never do that. That's because of your Christianity. John Adams said this. He said, if we make religion our business, God will make it our blessedness. I wouldn't like to hear George W. Bush say that. I'd like to hear the reaction from the news mafia if he said that. If he got up and said, if we make religion our business, God will make it our blessedness. Boy, wouldn't it be interesting to see what the news... They would demand, oh, you've offended the Muslims. Thank God. I mean, people, at what point do you rank as a minority? Blacks are called a minority because they are 20% of this country, but they are Americans. Muslims have been imported until they're about 1 million, possibly 2 million. That's a scratch, guys. That's not even a legitimate minority. So he says, well, you're offending them. Well, they need to be offended. They really do. They just come over here and put the tablecloth on the table and become a Christian. Andrew Jackson said the Bible is the rock on which this republic stands. So I want you to know that this nation, and don't you back down from anybody, this nation is the only nation in history that at its inception chose the God of this Bible, and that is what made it great. It is not anything in this country that made us great. It was someone outside this country that made this great, and we invited him in. I was telling your pastor, I don't know, I've gotten to Washington, D.C. I've not been there since the World War II memorial has been put up. But on the World War II memorial, they have the words of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the speech that he gave over the radio the day after, the day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And he ended that speech with these words, "So help us God," and those words are not on that memorial. I would like, you know what I feel like? I feel like a guy on a plane that somebody has hijacked it. I mean, most of the people liked where the plane was going, and it was our plane, but one or two terrorists got up in the cabin, and they have hijacked it, and they've changed the complete direction of it. And they get rid of God, and they don't want one nation under God and our pledge. You pick up that hymnal. You saw the songs that we sang about our country. You can't find a song that was written, a patriotic song that was written about this country that did not involve God. Every single one of them has at least a verse that mentions God. Not Allah, but God. And so this nation was founded on the God of this book. Let me tell you about the present, because it is the present that some of my brethren, including you, have a problem with. I've never seen a people so quick to surrender as Bible believers. I mean, we are so quick. Well, they're winning. Well, they got it. Well, it's against the law to pray in public school. You know, it's not against the law to pray in public school. And if they made a law that said it was a law, it was against the law to pray in public school, do you know that law would violate our Constitution, and our Constitution would supersede that state law? So it can never be impossible, or can never be against the law to pray in a public school to our God. But here's what happens. See, you don't think, you just watch TV, and so they go, well, somebody prayed in a school, and that's against the law. And you all go, well, against the law. I was with David Gibbs last week. He said in North Carolina, some reprobate judge, one of the things in their state constitution is that when they open a court, they say, God, what does he say? God grace this. God, say it again. God save this honorable court. That's what he says. And this reprobate judge didn't like God, so he said, you'll not say that anymore, and if anybody says it, you'll be thrown out. And that was overthrown and reinstituted, and the ungodly judge lost. You know where I saw that story on CNN? It was in that little part there that runs along the bottom. They wouldn't make it a story. This nation, let me tell you about this nation. This nation still stands by Israel. I know that we have crawled at it a few times. I know that we have not been the friend to Israel that we should be. I wouldn't sell a bullet to an Arab. We have given some of those Arab nations, we have given them some first-line fighters and tanks and things like that. I'm going to tell you, I would give the Jews every bomb and every bullet they want. I really would. But in spite of that, we still stand by Israel. And our president still stands by the nation of Israel. And that is imperative to the blessing of God on this nation, that this nation always stand by Israel. And this nation still does. I'll tell you something else. And you won't believe this because you only have a TV. This nation is still taking a stand against homosexuality. Since that, what is it, 7 reprobate guys there? 9? Yeah, but I don't think all of them even voted for it. Those guys in Massachusetts. I think it was those guys that said, queers could get married in their state. And since then, state after state after state have been passing laws forbidding same-sex marriage. Virginia just passed one. I mean, just 2 or 3 days ago. You know where I saw it? On CNN? That little line is right across the line. You know what CNN ought to be saying? Homosexuals lost another great battle today. But they will never report the failures of homosexuality. They will never report that those guys have been gone down in flames because they want you to think that they're going to win. And I know what some of you just said, well, maybe they didn't, but they're gonna. Well, thank you. Please throw up your white flag and get out of here because you're breathing my air. This nation is still standing against homosexuality. And the reason that is important is because all nations have sin in them, and ours is just the same. But homosexuality is the last sin that a nation embraces before God judges it. And I know what you think. You think, well, they're all out of the closet. They're only out of the closet to show up in front of a TV camera. I know you'll see an occasional one down the street, but I mean, they are not out there. I'm going to tell you, when it becomes legal, I'll tell you what they're going to do, Dad, Mom. They're going to proposition your son and your daughter on the street corner and throw you in jail for stopping it. They are not a nice bunch of people, okay? I was reading a book and it said that homicides amongst homosexuals against each other are record highs, and homosexuals are most likely to die violent deaths, most likely to die of disease. I was looking for the bad news in this when I was reading it. I couldn't find any, but oh, don't come up to me and say, love the sinner, hate the sin. I had a lady come up one time, and, it wasn't her fault. She was an American. She didn't think. And I was preaching. She said, you said queer. So I'm glad you were listening. I said, well, they're not gay. If you ever saw 2 in action, gay would not come to mind. Sick would come to mind. Perverted would come to mind. Abnormal would come to mind. Queer would come to mind. And she said, well, we're supposed to have grace with them. I said, really? I said, okay, let me ask you a question. I said, which is worse? Saying the word queer or being one? She said, well, being one. I said, and you think we should have grace with them? She said, yes. I said, then I demand the same grace for just saying the word. Use that. Bludgeon people with that. That woman just went. And every night she would leave and she'd look my way and I'd go, hey, if you can have grace with what they do, I demand you have grace with what I say. Love the sinner. This nation still votes right, believe it or not. I mean, the live ones that vote, they still vote, right? I mean, Democrats can't punch a hole in a piece of paper. You gotta, which I think makes sense. And then you give them a computer? They can train monkeys to punch holes in paper. You know that? Give a monkey a computer. You know what you'll have? A monkey with a computer. That's what you'll have. And this nation still votes right. Our president just passed a good deal. I liked it, you know. Under the previous king that we had, his last days on the throne, he declared that a bunch of wilderness areas, you couldn't build roads in them. And Bush just said, you can build all them roads and go log in wilderness, and tell them governors to ask me if they want to stop it. And I'm for it. Hey, he's not everything I want him to be, but it beats that mannequin that they had running against him. I mean, look at this, man. Last time the Democrats ran a mannequin, this time they're running Lurch. I'm going to tell you why you don't want to vote for John Kerry, because who will haunt the House? If he gets in the, you know, I mean, I can just see him come to the door of the White House. All right. I mean, who will haunt the House? He'll be out of a job. You know what your problem is? I'm going to tell you exactly what your problem is with America. You know what your problem is? It's the same problem you have with your pastor. It's the same problem you have with most preachers. You demand perfection. You can't stand an infraction. You can't stand the slightest step off of straight and narrow and exactly the way it should be. And as soon as somebody takes one, if they're not exactly 100% perfect, if they're not absolutely sinless, if they don't do everything absolutely right, you are willing to string them up. And you say anything good about this country, you know what it makes me mad? It makes me mad when some stinking, stupid, Bible-thumping, King James Bible believer walks up to me and says, well, yeah, but you know what they did? Here's what our government did, and then they tell me something bad about my country. I don't need to hear anything bad about my country. I know what's wrong with my country. It's full of people like me. Yes, I know what it's doing. But it took them over 200 years to mislead a good bunch of folks. And you aren't going to find better people in any country. I don't care where you go. Another thing Thomas Jefferson said was this. He said, the Bible makes the best people in the world. If you want to know who those folks are, go home and look in a mirror. You are the best people that walk this earth. I don't say that in pride. I say that because that is a fact. Listen, you never saw a nation in history that was so quick to let its 18-year-old boys go and die for somebody else's freedom, and some of them don't even appreciate or deserve the freedom. You never saw a nation that would find some way to find a cure for a disease, and as soon as they found the cure, you know what they would do? They would go out and give it to an entire nation to help another nation. When did you hear anybody else doing that? I talked to a fellow when Clinton was king one time. I was talking to this guy who was in the army, and he told me he's gone to this, I can't remember the name of it. It was some little African nation that's probably changed names 3 times this year already. It was one of those things, you know, you see a map of Africa and the name of the country is bigger than the country. No wonder they're going out there. Did you hear that this nation invaded that one? It's because they're trying to get their whole name on the map. They just want a strip 20 miles wide so that on the map they can have their whole name. It's, you know, and they're out of the borders. And he was in the army, and he said he was being shipped to this country. And I said, gee, do we have a base there? He said, no. I said, well, who does Clinton want to kill there, you know? And he said, nobody in particular. He said, in the army, I build water purification plants, and that nation has very bad water. We're going to build them 2 water purification plants that their people will have good water. Now, I'm going to tell you, all that stuff comes from this book. Americans have been permeated by this book. And that is why when somebody says we need to be more European, you tell them, no, Europe needs to be more American. We don't need their lack of scruples. We don't need their immoral television. Listen, the garbage that's on your TV was on their TV 25 years ago. The vile stuff. You drive down the road and see some guy going to the bathroom beside the highway. They did that in Europe 25 years ago, and they do it all the time. And that, I almost said it was European. Moving right along. Could you imagine, people, could you imagine the day before D-Day? This man is trying to build up the morale of his troops, and he says, "No, guys, tomorrow we're going to invade Normandy. I just want to let you know that the Germans outgun us and they outthink us. They're braver than we are. They've got concrete emplacements that are going to be able to shoot everybody that's on the beach, and we're probably all going to die. Okay, guys, let's get on the boats." But that is exactly the way we talk. I've never seen people that are more willing to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory than Christians. I've never seen a people that we will spin everything. Everybody tries to spin things to their advantage. We always spin things to our disadvantage. You know, I believed that communism was of the devil before I got saved. And after I got saved, I found out that the group I was with thought the same thing. It was of the devil. And that it needed to go. And I heard people say, communism's got to go. It's of the devil. And when it went, some of those very same guys said, I think this fall of communism was a trick of the devil. What's the matter, guys? Can't win one? We demand perfection of our nation. You're never going to have perfection. As soon as we hear one little thing that goes on in our country, we say, well, I can't back that. I like what Stephen Decatur said. He said America. He said my country. He said in America, in her intercourse with other nations, may she always be right. But America, my country, right or wrong. You stand by your family when they're wrong. You stand by people in this church when they're wrong. When you love somebody, you know what you're willing to do? You're willing to turn a blind eye to their flaws. And I am telling you that this nation today is still the greatest nation on the face of this earth. I want to talk to you about the future. I want you to go to Revelation chapter 12. I have heard, since the day I got saved, I have heard more eulogies and more funeral services for this nation by Bible believers. I have heard that God is done with America and America, it's all over and we may as well give up and it's not worth fighting for and it's not worth trying. And I just don't mind that, but I wish you'd haul down the American flag when they're doing that, because they wave this thing like they care about it. And they don't. And then you get the amateur Bible student that likes to walk around going, well, I don't find America in my Bible. Well, right there, I'm going to change what I believe because of what you can't find in your Bible. You probably can't find the book of concordance in your Bible. And guys, let me tell you this. This happened. It was 1947. It was in Texas City, Texas. I've preached in Texas City, Texas. That's near Galveston. And in Texas City, Texas, there was a Liberty ship called the Grand Camp. The Grand Camp. And 1947, that thing was carrying fertilizer, and it caught fire, and it was in the harbor of Texas City, Texas. And firemen went down there, and they were trying to put that thing out, and that ship exploded. It literally was vaporized. The people that were fighting that fire literally ceased to exist. They didn't find burned bodies; they just found powder. It literally devastated that nation, or that city. Hundreds of people died. Texas City, Texas, is an oil storage facility for offloading petroleum into ships, and so the concussion of that explosion burst oil storage tanks, and those burst into flames, and those began to blow up. Then another ship that had fertilizer caught fire, and they were pushing it out of the harbor when it exploded. And people died by the hundreds, and it was a horrible thing. There is a down on the waterfront. Actually, it's near one of the refineries. There's the rear screw from one of those ships. It probably is as tall as this, and it's laying there by the driveway. That's where it was blown, about a mile from the ship that blew up. And one of those fellows was taken And some Catholic priest, very overzealous, he was giving him his last rites while he was getting his watch off his wrist. And this guy was, he was burnt up. He's burnt up. He was laying there amongst the dying. And this Catholic priest came over, and started doing his fee-fi-fo, And he got about halfway through it, and this guy, he was kind of vaguely aware of something going on. He felt the watch slip from his wrist, his wedding ring came off. And finally this guy just mustered all of his strength that he could, and he said this. He said, "Wait a minute! I'm not dead!" He wasn't. And he didn't die. We've been trying to bury a nation that was not dead. For 35 years, 34 years that I've been saved, I've heard Bible believers. You know what we've done? You saw your pastor take a shovel full of dirt out of the ground today, and that was the beginning of something very good. But for the 34 years that I've been saved, I have watched we will take a shovel full of dirt and throw it onto America, and America keeps slinging it off and doing something for God. Now, guys, look, when this nation dies, I will stand by the grave and throw the dirt into. But it's not dead yet. Let's give it a chance. And I hear people say all the time that, America's got to fall. And that America has got to fall doctrine is why we are suckers for everything that comes down the pike that spells doom and disaster. So here's what I heard. I went to Bible college in 1970, and I heard by July 4th, 1976, the communists were going to take America, haul down that flag, and run the communist flag to the top of the flagpole in Philadelphia, where our Constitution was formed. That made for an exciting 6 years. For 6 years, you know what I thought about? Man, it's just about over. Every day it's coming closer to being it's just about over. Boy, we're going to be running through the woods. They're going to be putting us in concentration camps. And July 4th, 1976 came. 1976 came and went, and I've been there, and that flag is still there. But the Russians did come to Constitution Square in Philadelphia. They did. They came in 1987. In 1987, some time ago, I was in Philadelphia, and our guide was a saved fella, and he told me this. We were looking at the Liberty Bell, and he said in 1987, they shut the Liberty Bell off. They wouldn't let anybody in it. They said a big old black limousine pulled up in front of the where the Liberty Bell was housed, and this white-haired man walked in. They said he walked into the room where the Liberty Bell was, and he just stood there for half an hour. Didn't say a word. Nobody in there with him. He just stood there and looked at that Liberty Bell. And after 30 minutes of looking at that Liberty Bell, he turned around and got back in his limousine and left. His name was Boris Yeltsin. And 3 years later, communism was dead. Not only is that flag still flying over America, but the hammer and sickle of communism is not flying over some of the countries it was flying over July 4th of 1976. And then what did we hear? Oh, I know. Do you remember this one? 1982, the planets are going to line up. When those planets line up, the gravity of all those planets is going to cause nothing. Right? But I'll bet some of you were all excited about, oh man, this is a big one, this is a big one. You know why you believe that? Because you got suckered into believing that America's got to die. And so every time something arises on the horizon, you think this is what's going to kill it. So when the news mafia manufactured, listen, the greatest terrorist organization in the world is the news media because they spread more terror than any Muslim ever did. And when they manufactured a scare tactic called Y2K, you went out and bought a generator and 10 years supply of freeze-dried pizza. And you said, now this one is it. And what's really crazy is you've been hooked and hooked and hooked. And if tomorrow they had something on the news that it looked like it could spell the doom of this country, you jump right back on the bandwagon. This is the big one. Because you're convinced America's got to die because somebody told you that. You're convinced that America's got to be judged. You're convinced that we're all got to end our time on this earth hiding in the woods. Which if you do, you guys are in trouble. You ain't got a whole lot of woods. Somebody said, I never saw America in the Bible. Your pastor helped me with that. He said, well, I find a judgment of nations. And those sheep nations are the nations that blessed Israel. I got news for you. When nations are judged, I'd rather live here than France. I'd rather live here than Germany. Hey, I would rather live Britain. Britain has been pretty fair by those Jews. I'd rather live in England than any Arab nation. I don't know if America's not necessarily in the Bible, but let me show you something. In the tribulation, and I'm only reading this because I'm not going to experience this. Some of my brethren want to experience this tribulation, and that'd be fine with me. But I'm going to watch this from heaven. And it says this in verse 13, talks about the woman who gave birth to the man-child. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 13, it said, when the dragon saw that he was cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great what? Eagle. Hey guys, what is America known as? Why don't you have a leopard on here? Because America's not a leopard. America's an eagle. Could I predict something? I'm not necessarily prophesying for you. I'll tell you what I think. I think America is always going to stand politically by Israel. Yes, we may do our political two-step and sell, help them in one hand and help the Arabs in another. But I think bottom line, when the Jews have to run in the middle of tribulation, it's the eagle that is going to show up and rescue them. Now think about the import of that truth. It says, 2 wings of an eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. This eagle is going to take care of Israel for the latter part of the tribulation. By the way, probably not in Selah Petra. And I only say that for this reason. If you know it and I know it, you think the devil doesn't know it? People say, well, that's a great place for him to hide because you get into Selah Petra, this little passage, and only one person can come at a time. Yeah, but Selah Petra is not domed. And in the days of airplanes and bombs and helicopters, it's easy to take that place out. I don't necessarily know wilderness. It says maybe Idaho. Anyway, now think about this, guys. You know that the devil hates this nation. Why does the devil want this nation destroyed so desperately? If he wants to ultimately destroy Israel, and he knows that it is America that is going to come to the rescue of Israel, then it is imperative to him that he destroy the rescuer. You know what I think when I think that? If that is true, then if you are a Christian and you want to see the destruction of America too, whose side are you really on? If you want to see America come apart, if you want to see the death and destruction of America, if 9/11 happened and our 2 towers came down and you said they had it coming, I think you're a pretty wicked character. I think you're a pretty rotten person. I really do. I think you ought to get right with God. This nation has stood by God. This nation has stood by Israel. And I think in the tribulation it's going to stand by Israel. Now, you ready for this? I said politically this nation will stay with Israel. Can I ask you a question? If America is going to stay right politically, why can't we see to it she stays right spiritually? If there is a hope for this country that it is still going to be here, I don't care what you read in the commentary. If there is a hope that that America is going to stand by Israel, why can't we see to it that she stays right spiritually? We haven't lost people. We've surrendered. You look at every major victory that the devil has had in this country, and it has not been after a battle with it was a battle with Christians and the Christians lost. It was as soon as we saw the battle, we ran. Now, please understand, I'm not preaching post-millennialism. I do not believe that we're going to bring the millennium in. I am not a Reconstructionist. I'm not talking about take the country back in the Constitution, all this other stuff. I am simply telling you this. We need to stand for our nation. And I think there is time to sway this country back to God. You know what makes me mad? When I make that statement, there are King James Bible believers, if they heard that statement, they'd think I was a heretic. Why is it a heretic to love my country? Why am I a heretic to think that this nation could actually do something for God? Oh, I don't know that we're going to be idyllic, skipping down the street with our King James Bible under our arms. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. But guys, we can do something for God. And as the time goes by, what are you going to do? I can tell you exactly what you're going to do. You're going to do one of two things. In this battle to put America back where she needs to be for God. Don't come to me, please, do not come to me with all of the reasons why it never can happen. I only have to watch 5 minutes of TV to be convinced it can't happen. And you guys watch a whole lot more. That's why you have no hope. That's why you're demoralized. In this battle for this country, you're going to be one of two things. A worker or a watcher. And we have been trained to watch, have we not? I mean, we know how to watch. We watch so well, we can have a TV with 2 screens on it now. Because we know how to watch. And tonight we'll watch fireworks and good night. All you got to do is watch a landing of a space shuttle to know that you've been trained not to think. You know, when the space shuttle comes into view, there'll be a double sonic boom. And if you're watching it on TV, you'll hear this boom, boom. And the announcer will say, there was the double sonic boom. Oh, thank you. And then he'll swing around into the wind. It doesn't have an engine, you know. It's only got one shot at this runway. And he'll swing around into the wind. And he'll say, he's swinging around into the wind. Then you'll see the landing gear come down on the space shuttle, and this genius news mafia guy will say, and now the landing gear is down. Well, thank you. I almost thought that. I'm glad you said it. And then he'll make his pass and he'll be right over the end of the runway, and he'll say, he's over the end of the runway. No kidding. I thought he was over Lake Mead. And then, you know, you ever watch, we've all seen airplanes land, and when they land, you know, you see that smoke. And so you'll see those stars, 2 puffs of smoke, and before you can think, oh, he's touched down, the announcer will say, he's touched down. Then the nose gear will touch. Oh, look, the nose gear's touched. Then he'll coast to a stop, and genius has to say, he's coasted to a stop. And you never had to think one time. They told you everything. So then they get on the news and they tell you something else and you can't help but go along with it. Maybe you ought not to believe that stuff. You are going to be a worker or you are going to be a watcher. You are going to sit by with your hands in your pockets and you are going to watch this country go down to slammers. Or you're going to be a worker trying to do something to wrestle it back. You know what you don't understand? What you don't understand is that the devil's plan has had more drawbacks and more bad days and more things mess it up and throw its timetable off than God's plan ever has. But we have ascribed victory at every opportunity that the devil's ever had. Let me tell you what a fellow said one time. This was Edward Everett Hale. He said this, and I want you to think about it. He said, I am only one. Well, isn't that you? Right? I am only one. But I am one. I can't do everything. But I can do something. And what I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I shall do. I don't know how my life is going to end. But I know what I'm going to be doing when it ends. I'm going to be doing everything I can to steer this nation back to God. I want to be a worker. I am only one, and I can't do everything, but I am one, and I can do something. And I am going to do, by the grace of God, everything I can do. What are you going to do? I'd like you to stand with your heads bowed. I've never asked you to do this before. I'm going to ask you to do this tonight. Your head's bowed and your eyes closed. How many of you, you're saved, been saved a while, believe the book? How many of you would say this? Preacher, I got to be honest with you. More than once in my life, I've had, and not by your pastor, by the way. I know your pastor is not guilty of this, but you would say, I have heard things that have demoralized me for ever trying to do anything for this country. I have heard things that have just made me feel like I shouldn't even bother trying. But I think there's hope. Here's my hand. Come on, put them up. You've been demoralized. Put them down. You've been demoralized by King James Bible believers. It really bothers me that we knock the Muslims and yet our doctrine is the same as theirs. Hey, Bible believers hate America just about as bad as the Muslims do. And when the towers came down, they rejoiced. And when the towers came down, they rejoiced. And you figure out which one is which. Maybe before this whole thing is over, the queers will have the country and we will be running through the woods. But until then, I'm not throwing a shovel full of dirt in the face of my country. I want to stand for this country. I have got plans, guys. I have got plans. I really do. And there are some things that I think maybe I can do that you can't do. Then what I can do, I ought to do. And I'll do mine. You going to do yours? So I can't do everything, preacher. No, you don't have to do everything. You just need to do something. You going to do something? Are you just going to sit on the edge of your couch practicing for the remote Olympics, bad-mouthing this nation at every turn of the road, so that you have an excuse to just sit on the edge of the couch doing nothing? You going to be a worker? You going to be a watcher? It's really your choice, guys. Father, I pray for these people because these are good folks. As people go, God, these are good people. And I know they've got a pastor who has not bludgeoned them with doom and gloom. I know that. Father, I don't know if we can turn our nation back to you before you get back, but I do believe that this nation is going to stay true to your people. Then there is no reason why it can't also stay true to you. But it's going to take us, God. We can't ask you to do it because you put us here to do it. And I pray for these people that raise their hands. They've been demoralized by Bible believers. They've been shamed because they love their country. And they've been told that any effort is hopeless and heresy. God, I pray for these people that they will live for you, that they will be brave and bold for you. If the people who are wicked in this nation can be bold, then we can be bold. If they can do things not caring that we will dislike them, then we can do things not caring that they will dislike us. And they're afraid of us, God, far more than we are afraid of them. God, if the powers of darkness knew how neutered we have been, they wouldn't hesitate to push their program, but they're still afraid because they know the power of your people. And all I ask tonight, God, is that everybody that can do something will do that something to your glory in this country. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Maybe you need to resolve yourself tonight to get off the couch and be disliked by somebody that doesn't like your country. Okay? And don't be intimidated into doing nothing. Preacher.
Appreciate that, man. And I'm Brother Gipp and I have had this discussion many times before. I've never been able to figure out why a Christian would believe or want to believe that God was done with America. Maybe it's laziness. There is a doctrine or a theology of defeat, and that excuses you from doing nothing. Maybe it's fatalistic determinism, which is a theological term for the natural outcome of five-point Calvinism when you finally figure out you can't do anything anyway, so you just give up. Maybe it's that mentality. I don't know. But I don't know what the final outcome is going to be for this country. But boy, I'll tell you what, I want to do everything I can to make sure it's positive. And I'm with Brother Gipp. I think most of the victories that the enemies of this country have gotten have been because we've been listening to the news media and others that have said we can't win when we've already won. And most of the victories the other side has gotten has just been because they've been handed to them. They have no legitimate claim to them. And so as a Christian, I want to stand by this country, and I want to keep on going for the Lord. I'll tell you another lie that runs parallel with that one and virtually hand in hand with the one that Brother Gipp talked about was this one. Well, you know, we're in the last days, and it's days of apostasy, and really can't get much done. And so that's why, you know, our church is 3 old codgers and a draft dodger. And we've been that way for 20 years, and we're just hanging in there for Jesus. And I'm sure God will be very proud of us when we get to the judgment and take our pound and unravel it out of the napkin and hand it back to Him. And I preach against that across this country. And that's one of the reasons we started a pastor school, is to encourage some other churches that they can grow and they can have victory and they can be blessed. And a lot of the defeat is being experienced because people just don't believe it can be done. And it can, and it should. And I don't know. You know, it's like Brother Gipp said, we've talked about this before, but there's going to be some sheep nations. The last time I checked, there's only 2 countries of any consequence, even remotely standing with Israel. Us for sure, and you can make somewhat of a case for England, unless there's some banana republic out there that I don't know about. We're it. So I'm praying we continue. I believe that's a hope that we have. That's a hope we should pass on to our children. You know, the public school system, public education, and the media has done a lot to try to make your kids think that this country was founded on an evil premise and goes around doing evil. It's up to you to make sure they know otherwise. This is the greatest nation in the world. This does have the best people. This does have the best leadership. And it is the most benevolent nation on the face of the earth, bar none. And so until the other ones catch up to us, my natural response to someone criticizing this country is to want to make a fist and splatter their nose all over their face. I praise the Lord for that message. Amen. Well, we've heard a lot. We've experienced a lot this week. I believe it's been good, and I'm going to go back to what I said earlier in the week. It's been a very unusual meeting. Once in a while I'm in a meeting like this. Typically, in a meeting with this much preaching, I feel like I've just been pushed under an avalanche and got buried under a bunch of preaching and information. But this week, I feel like from the very get-go that I've been able to assimilate and grow. And line has been upon line, and line upon line, and precept upon precept, and precept upon precept. And I feel that I've grown through the meeting and gotten so much. Let's make up our minds to carry through and follow through and go on with what the Lord showed us this week. If there's some decision you made to start doing something, make sure you start doing it. If there's a decision that God laid on your heart to quit doing something, make sure you quit. Whatever it is, individually, as families, and collectively as a church, let's go forward. Let's go on until He returns, or we go home by the way of the sod. Either way, the time is short, folks. And I'd rather spend my remaining years doing the best I can for my God, my family, my country, this church. And while I don't believe this, if my efforts were doomed to start with, I think God will forgive me. I don't think they are. I think we're more than conquerors through Him that loved us. But I'd rather go to the judgment seat of Christ having tried to do something I couldn't do if it was right, and get to the judgment seat of Christ and find out that I twiddled my thumbs, didn't do what I was supposed to do because I got talked out of it. Like I said, the Lord wasn't too impressed with that guy that returned that 1 pound in the napkin. He wasn't too happy about that at all. All right, let's sing number 316, I Have Decided to Follow Jesus.
I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Still I will follow. No turning the world behind me, the cross before. The world behind me, the cross before me. Behind me, the cross before me. No turning
All right, you're certainly welcome to stick around if you want to participate in the various activities. If you've got any questions about that, see Brother Garcia. There are some sheets out at the Information Center. Some of you may want to go home and get yourself ready and come back and watch the fireworks. I know a lot of folk do that. Some of you will probably just want to go home. God bless you as you're dismissed. Let me also mention one more time, please supervise your children. We do need to get our belongings out of the auditorium. The auditorium will be locked down. But keep an eye on your kids. Don't let them run wild. We want them to have a good time. We don't want anybody hurt. We don't want to lose track of them. And as I mentioned before, no fireworks, please. And leave Fifi at home. Or Fido. Or whoever. Okay? God bless you. You are dismissed.